Oh crap, we're competing with the Coltrane House. How are you?
Evening live.
What's happening out there, everybody?
All right. I am Joey. In the upper left is Tommy. In the lower left is Len. And right below me in the lower right is our special guest, Andy Aledort.
Yeah, Andy. Thank you so much.
We'll go on.
Honor to have you here with us tonight.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. The honor is mine to be with you guys.
It's exciting, actually. It's some people know. I talk about Andy all the time because I've taken a lesson from him, and he's very, very patient and kind, while saying that's not right, Tom.
Shut up, Tom. I have no patience for you.
I know. He's like, no. You know what? Why don't we just talk, and we're not going to play because that's just a fucking waste of time for you. So that's usually
it's hard to have patience with Tom. I have to say. So.
Oh, really?
It is. It is an honor. The first person who I played with after becoming sober was Andy, because I begged, "Can I sit in?" And he's like, fuck. How can I say no? He lives down the street. So
that was not my reaction.
that was not my reaction. No.
I said sober. No. But I didn't know it, but I did not know you at all. And it was really cool. I'm always happy to meet, more guitar players, especially a guy who lives in Seacliff. And we had a great time. It was fantastic. So.
Yeah, I played the whole set, and I was like, "Do you want to play more?" And I'm like, "I'm already weak at the knees." So
he kept trying to leave. We wouldn't let him leave.
It was great. It's great. We have, and another thing I talk about, we have a great musical community here in Seacliff, led by a whole bunch of talented people and a whole bunch of people who love music, like we do, and that's the reason why we do the show. So, Andy, thank you for doing what you do. Anytime.
I wish we could all get back to what we have been doing for so long, and what has come to define this town of Seacliff with music. 3 different places to have music, and all of us, if we're free and around, we all jump up with each other, and all these weird cross-pollinated bands just having a good time playing music, and the venues are into it, and the town is into it. The village trustees and the mayor and everybody, it's really great. I've been here for almost 30 years, actually. 28 years ago we moved here. My daughter was 2.5. She's 31 now. And my son was born shortly thereafter, and he's 28 now. So this is a great town. It's, really, it's just really great to be in a place where, I could go up the street and play, and have so many friends, and it's all great stuff.
You're absolutely right. I mean, just here, like you said, there's music 3 venues. There's live music at the beach. There's live music in the park. Right. Any one of us can go and if one of us are free, they're like, come on and play. Let's and it can be a whole bunch of different people. We pretty much run the gamut. The only thing that we really don't have is my full on metalhead, night that I really need just for me. But
why not?
I don't know. It's really upsetting me because people need to see, how far my fingers can spread apart, and play. That's important.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it's amazing. And like you said, the gamut. I mean, there's gypsy jazz one night. There's other people.
You know what, Tom? I bet you that if you did, NWOBHM night, some people know what that's for, some people don't.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm bringing down my JMP for some Def Leppard, man. Come on.
Right, man. We'll definitely do that. We could do.
Packed.
It probably would.
Yeah.
It's packed. The other thing that's here is a couple of the people work with the younger kids and put the bands together, and they do afternoons with that. And at the bar, the kids getting their first time playing, and we all go down and support that because it's amazing to see. And the excitement that we had the first time, we were allowed to play any place, right? I mean, just like, oh my God, am I going to do this? Oh my God. And you have people there who are, I forgot my cord because he's a kid, and everybody's got one in their car.
Right.
So it's great. But enough about the Village, Andy. I think you started guitar just when you moved here, right? 28 years ago.
Started the guitar. I'm not sure what you mean.
Started playing guitar when you moved to Seacliff, or was there a little history before that?
It was quite a while before that. Guitar players often, when they get together, like to talk about their first guitar. There's even a book that's called My First Guitar. It's actually a pretty interesting book because, every guitar player has a story about their first guitar. It's just how it is, and you never, lose that sort of romanticized feeling you have for your first guitar. Just even if it sucked, usually for most of us, the first guitar did suck.
Take your fingertips off.
Doesn't matter, that's how you, open the door to, this amazing world. But in my case, pardon the name dropping time, I was in a conversation with Jimmy Vivino, who many of you probably know, the guitar player from Conan O'Brien, really good guy. And we were having this conversation about, hey, what was your first guitar? When did you get it? And I told him, I said, well, with me, the deal was my mom was a singer, and, she did like some musicals and shows and then sang on the radio. And I was, grew up, well, that's actually a little later, around a lot of music. But right before I was born, when she was pregnant with me, she was taking guitar lessons from a guy named Joe Monk, who's like a Long Island legend.
Yeah,
Joe
Monk, he's a legend.
Taught like 5 generations of guitar players up until the 2000s, I think, is when he passed away. And anyway, so she asked him, she said, she didn't have a guitar. She said, I want to buy a guitar. Can you help me get a guitar? And so he helped her get, he had friends at Guild. He said, oh, call this guy at Guild. And, she wanted a smaller guitar, so she got I was born in 56. She got a 1955 Guild F20 acoustic guitar. And then I was born a few months later. So Vivino said to me, so the guitar was there before you were even there? I said, yes.
Waiting.
Guitar beat me. There was a guitar there when I got there. And I still have it. And it's actually a fantastic guitar. It's a great guitar.
Yeah.
So, some of my earliest memories, involved the guitar in some sort of way. And then, I was born in 1956, so I was 7 years old, about to turn 8 when the Beatles were on Ed Sullivan. And, that was a cataclysmic moment for everyone, the earth.
The world, really, right?
Yeah, and Hard Day's Night was on TV last night, which was really cool. There's
Great
so
movie.
much
Yeah,
to
I
watch.
love that movie.
And but Beatlemania, you know, was like it was a real thing. Like it was like a truly palpable excitement about like nothing's cooler than this. Play guitar, learn these songs, sing, be in a band, you know. It was very romantic, but at the same time, the Beatles happened to be really good, you know.
Yeah, that kind of sucks.
Really good songs. And
Yeah, they had a couple of
so
hits, didn't they?
I started to play a little bit after that. I'm sorry, what was that?
They had a couple of hits, right?
They had a couple hits, one or two hits.
Yeah.
Yesterday was one of them. And but you know, I didn't really start to play until I was about 11 in '67, and but at the risk of making the story even longer, music wasn't really my thing. I was really into art, and I was drawing and painting from when I was really little, like 4 or 5 years old, and so I played guitar. But it was a very secondary thing. And in high school, like all my buddies were a million times better guitar player than I was. And I was planning to go to college for art, which I ultimately did. But while I was in my first year of college, right when I turned 17, I don't know, like a switch went off, and all of a sudden I was playing like 6-7 hours a day, and it just, you know, it just completely changed. So anyway. That's 40, how many years ago is that? 17, 47 years ago.
Yeah.
Goes quick, though. Like the 8 hours of practicing a day, just all of a sudden you're just there doing it. So from there...
Yeah, it was mandatory. In fact, what happened was I got out of... high school early. I was only 16 years old and I went to college. And as I said, guitar wasn't really my thing. I was into art. But the guy in the next room was this guy, Tom Mariano, who was graduating the Hart School of Music. He was brilliant, like the star music student of the school. And he was in the next room and he would say, "Oh, come in here." And he would put on like Bill Evans or Chick Corea or Keith Jarrett records, and he had a Fender Rhodes in his room, and he'd play along to the records, and he'd lift the needle. We'd get extremely stoned, and he would lift the needle, and he'd say, "Oh, these are the chords." Like it was like the most advanced, it's completely insane. And I'm 16, and he would say, "Get your guitar, let's jam." And he had a stand-up bass in his room. He'd say, "Play stand-up bass." I'd say, "Tom, I don't know how to play stand-up bass." He'd say, "I don't care," you know. So he would like follow me. Anyway, he was like a real musical guru, and I always give Tom the credit because the guy was just like living, breathing music, and he was 10 feet away from me in the other room. And so I'd go back in my room, and like I couldn't. It was the only thing to do was to pick up the guitar and play for 6 hours. And after 5 months at Hartford, I came back to Little Neck, and I went over to my buddy's house, who was like the best guitar player in town, and I picked up his guitar, and he was pissed off. He heard me playing. He's like, "What the hell happened to you?" I said, "What kind of bullshit is this? I just don't fucking play." And we're still very good friends, and we play together whenever we can. His name's Peter Suckle. But it was just hysterical because he was like, very shortly before that, before I went, we would jam. I told Dickie Betts a story. Like, it would take all my concentration to be able to play like a song, jamming in Peter's basement. And I'd be just like trying to play rhythm and play the right parts and just looking down. And if Peter wanted me to take a guitar solo, he would kick me. Like, I'd feel like he'd kick me, and then I'd go start the solo. And then when he wanted me to stop soloing, he'd kick me again.
Yeah, wasn't that's the way that everything happened in the 70s? I remember the same thing, man. Like it's solo time, yeah, somebody's kicking you, or or pointing or something. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, I had to be kicked.
Yeah,
and, we were telling.
I'm staying away from you next time we play.
I'm not kicking anyone.
I might deserve it.
But we were telling Dickie Betts a story, and Dickie goes, "Oh, kind of like an old jukebox." Yeah, exactly. That's exactly like it. So anyway, you know, right when I turned 17, just sort of, you know, the switch got switched, and that was, you know, I just, like, I couldn't, it just became the thing. But what was funny was, it was exactly when I started at School of Visual Arts in New York City for art. So, believe me, I couldn't have been happier. I was in New York City 73 through 77. All day long was art, sculpture, painting, and drawing, art galleries, New York City 1973, CBGBs, and Max's Kansas City, and everything. And then that was the art part. And then I'd come home at night, and I had a band, and I would play 4 nights a week. And so, and in 73, I bought this guitar. So, you know, it's been with me for a while.
That's awesome. Amazing. So you know, you get out of art school. What was the plan after that?
Well, I mean, it was 1977, and you know, I wanted to play music as much as possible. I was definitely, even though I'd studied art, I got a degree in fine art. So some of the guys during the 4 years split off into actually, you know, graphic art and design, ways you could make a living. You know, me and my collection of hardcore insane people, you know, all just kept making, like, you know, abstract expressions, paintings, and whatever. But you know, there was kind of there were two types of musicians. There were the guys. There were guys that became club date musicians because you could make a living. In 1977, gas was 50 cents a gallon, and so, you know, if you made $300 or $400 a week, your rent was probably $300 a month. You know, and you could buy a car for $300 or something. And so, all those guys I knew that became club date musicians had money, you know, and their own places to live and everything else. But they were all miserable. Music became like a job and something that they didn't look forward to doing. And I knew that was not what I was interested in at all. You know, like, it just, you know, there was no point to, if I was going to play music I was going to hate in an environment that I would hate. It would be like any job. Like, why? It's not.
Yeah, I mean.
Yeah, exactly.
Just because it involves
the job.
These, it's not. You know, it's as I might as well be a garbage man or something. So I started painting houses, and I was a house painter for 6 years, and then played gigs too. And so the only downside of that was when you're getting up at 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning and paint houses all day, and then you go to the gig. I was falling asleep on gigs.
Oh yeah, I mean, just, you know, a lot of people don't know, who may be listening, like the gig environment in New York is different than a lot of other places. We you know, back then we would play until 4 o'clock in the morning, right?
Oh God, yeah, it's 4 sets, 10 to 4.
Yeah.
4 sets of, you know, I mean, it was almost like Hamburg, right? So I mean, we're just beating this thing to death and then going to work. But you know, we were young, and it was hard. It's not, you know, a lot of the, you know, people that we talk about with the last 5 years with the gig economy, these are people who, you know, get to start their sets at 8 and be done by 10. You know, that's been happening. It didn't happen when we were doing, you know, when I was doing 4 sets and just dragging it.
We got paid the same amount in 1970.
Yeah, I know, the same amount as I'm getting paid, right? You know, for a gig. It's amazing.
Yeah, well, if you're getting paid,
100 or 125 bucks.
Yeah.
Back
you're getting paid. Yeah,
78. Yeah, right. And you know, I mean, $100 could easily last you a week if gas is 50 cents. You know,
yeah.
Six pack was, you know, $2. You know,
and I didn't smoke, so I saved a lot of money there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now it's $13 a pack. I've heard.
I mean, I remember when people were like, you know, $3 for a pack of cigarettes, like, that's insane. You know, in the machines at the.
Yeah.
At the bar, yeah.
So,
Now you need a gold card.
Yeah.
but in 70, well, I could go back a little bit if you want to hear it.
Sure, yeah, that's why we're here.
Guys, any of you guys are familiar with a booking agent named Rick Morgan?
Yes.
You knew Rick
Yeah.
Morgan? You know, he's
Yeah,
still around.
Well, the thing is,
He's still around.
the history that I have, Doug, right? Doug Verity, who was my mentor, worked with Rick Morgan's group back then with the band he was in. That's how I knew.
Okay.
As I was this 15-year-old, hide behind the PA roadie.
Oh, cool. What was the name of that band?
God, it was probably the White Mice band at the time.
Uh-huh.
If I remember, he was in. If I recall, he had left Essence at that point because he was in Essence at one point. So.
And so, what year is this?
Probably 79.
Okay, and is he playing like Rum Runners and
Yeah, it's Rum Runners. It's
Beggar's Opera. And,
yeah, Beggar's Opera. So I
Madhouse.
was in all those places at 15 and 16. With a tiny bud, and sitting behind the PA, making sure that everything's okay, and really just again when that was a 4-set night too, right back then, and
sure.
and people stayed for 4 sets. I mean, there was.
I know. We would purposely play like Sitting on Top of the World by Cream really slow at 4 a.m. because it would make people leave.
Right.
We would what can we play so they'll go home?
Yeah, because
We couldn't play shit kicking music anymore because we'd been playing that all night.
Right. I mean, you're already done. I mean, you're exhausted at this point.
They would stay if we kept playing it. No one would leave. So
Right.
let's play something they'll hate, and then
You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here.
Yeah.
our regular once a month gig was at a place called John Barleycorn's.
Yeah.
In '78, I had a southern rock band called the what was it called? The White River Band. The guitar player is a guy named Kevin Dunn, which some of you guys might know. Kevin's been in a lot of bands through the years, and he was a really great guitar player and singer. But the reason I brought up Rick Morgan is
Rick Morgan.
in '76, I had a power trio we did 30 Hendrix songs, and we did Johnny Winter and Mountain and Frank Zappa and Robin Trower and stuff like that. Just like heavy, Deep Purple, 3-piece rock, really heavy, and big emphasis on Hendrix.
Yeah.
And so we went to Rick's office in Uniondale in the afternoon, and we used to everybody would make fun of Rick Morgan. Everybody would go, "I'm Rick Morgan, you've got a really good band," because he had his British accent, which we all thought was fake. And he looked like he was in like Mick Teasy, Dicky, like whatever the name of that band was. He wore jumpsuits and had like a shag haircut. Or like it was like a grown out Beatle cut or something. But so we in the afternoon we played for him in his office, like I did Star Spangled Banner, and I played with my teeth, and like the whole like the whole Woodstock, Into Purple Haze, and they were like pinned to the wall. I had my half-stack Marshall 100 watt super lead like in an office, and they were like this. It was like him and his girlfriend and one other person. And so we finish, and he's like, "Yeah, you guys are great. The band's great. I could book you guys. You could play 3-4 nights a week, no problem." So we said, "Great." And he goes, "Now, this is 1976. He goes, "The only thing is you're going to have to play all Linda Ronstadt, the Eagles, America," and I was like, "Did you hear what we just played?" And he was like, "All I'm telling you is if you want to work Jackson Browne, this is what you have to play. If you guys want to work 3-4 nights a week, that's what you should play. Get another guitar player, sing harmonies. So
play the FM hits.
So we did, and I was suicidal, but ultimately it sort of morphed into 2 full sets of the Allman Brothers and 2 full sets of the Grateful Dead, which made our lives kind of simpler because weren't playing these other things, and it was more fun in a way. But it's sort of funny because I would rag on it, to a certain extent because it wasn't really my favorite music. And then years later, I get hired by Dickie Betts to play with Dickie Betts. So all those guys were like, "Oh man, all you did was complain about having to play Statesboro Blues." And I was like, "Yeah, but it's with them now. It's with the guy. Like it's a little different."
Right. Now, how was that?
The experience of playing with Dickie Betts?
Yeah.
It was. You got to hear about that, man.
It was a great experience. I mean, the way it even happened was kind of crazy because, I started writing for guitar magazines in 1984, and through the years, I met and got to play with, just sitting around jamming, primarily, but sometimes getting up in a gig situation. Meet and play with like so many of my heroes. The first guy was Steve Morse, who I love, and I'd seen him a million times.
Yeah, that's a lot, man.
Wow.
So 1985, March of 85, I did a long interview with him, and ultimately became friends with him. And in later years, I'd go to his house and stay at his house, and he's one of the coolest people in the world, aside from being one of the greatest guitar players ever. Just the greatest guy. And so Buddy Guy, B.B. King, Johnny Winter, like all these people I was interviewing and playing with. And then the first guy who invited me to play with him on stage was Albert Collins. And that was an amazing experience. But anyway, Dickie Betts I never met. And by 2000, by the time he got thrown out of the Allman Brothers, I'd been writing for guitar magazines for 17 years. And I had met so many people and had never met him. And on some level I thought, I might never meet him. If I never meet him, that's just the way it is, But he gets kicked out of the Allman Brothers. And Dickie had always been asked, to write like instructional columns or do a lesson for a guitar magazine, whether it be Guitar Player or whatever, going all the way back to the beginning. And he never wanted to do it because he just didn't feel comfortable teaching at all. Well, anyway, so he gets thrown out of the Allman Brothers, and as you may recall, Butch Trucks and Greg were trying to justify kicking Dickie out. So they said, "Oh well, he's a drug addict and he can't play anymore, and he's out of his mind, and he's unreliable." And Guitar World contacted his manager and said, would Dickie be interested in doing like a monthly column? And he was looking for some good press because all the press on him at that moment was terrible. And to be honest, he was really not happy. I mean, he knew what he was going to do. He was completely flipped out. Like he just got kicked out of the band he started. So it was a tough time for him. Anyway, so he wasn't completely against it. I went and met him in his hotel room. He was playing at Westbury, so he was staying at a hotel, I think in Garden City. And I went and met him in his hotel room, and he was really intense. It was like he wasn't warm and fuzzy, let's put it that way. And but like we talked for about an hour and a half. He looked terrible. You could tell that he was in a bad place. Like mentally, he had just formed the Dickie Betts band, his first post Allman Brothers band, and they were playing with Charlie Daniels at this sort of like revamped volunteer jam. Okay. The year was 2000 or 2001, something like that. and or it could have been 2, but anyway, but like he warmed up and he was into it, and so I started to call him and work with him on his columns. I sent him my first album, which had just come out, an album called Put a Sock in It, and the first track on the album is a cover of the Freddie King tune, The Stumble. And we were on the phone one day, and Dickie said, "Hey man, I listened to your CD." He said, "That first track will knock your hat in the lake." You're talking about The Stumble. And I said, "Well man, if there was ever an opportunity to play with you, it'd be a great honor." And he said, "I'll tell you what, take this phone number down. This is stage manager. Any gig that you can make, call Mike, and there'll be a half-stack Marshall waiting for you." Like, that was kind of amazing, right?
Wow.
That's a big deal. I mean, just you weren't in the band at this point, but he's like, just call. Okay.
Yeah, he dug the record, and he liked my guitar playing, and I mean, an open invitation. He's like, just call any gig if you can make it. Call Mike, and there'll be an amp there. So for 3 years, I went and sat in. Like, it was almost like I drew a circle on a map of like 150-mile radius. If I could get there in 2 hours, I was going to show up. And so, without exaggeration, I probably went and played with him 20 times over 3 years, at least. And it was funny, in March of 2005. So now, by this point, it's been like 3 years of me going and sitting in with him and hanging out with him, like after the show and getting to know him. This was before he asked me to join the band. And so I went and sat in with him in Ridgefield, Connecticut in March of 2005. And usually I would get up and play 2 songs. And, when you're a guest, everybody knows the protocol,
Right.
You're leaving before they have to tell you to leave, right?
Yep.
You're already like unplugging and walking off like the second the song's over. That's the polite thing to do. So I can't remember the 2 songs that I would always play. One of them was Southbound, and then some other song. And we play the 2 songs, and I go to take off my guitar, and he just goes like this. Like, don't go anywhere. So we play another song. He goes like this. Play another song. And now he's just playing the rest of the set, and he's not even looking at me. And I'm like, I guess I'm supposed to stay here. Like, I don't really know, like, what I'm supposed to do. And, I have to say that, Dan Toller was his guitar player then. And so when I would sit in, generally Dan would sit down. And Dan, was the most generous, one of the greatest people you could ever meet, and an amazing guitar player. And this particular gig, Dan stayed up, so I had my own amp to play through. But then 2 months later, at 10 o'clock in the morning, I'm standing on line at the bank, and my cell phone rings, and I look down, and I see it says Dickie Betts. I'm like, and I said, "Dickie, what's happening?" And he goes, "Well, my guitar player just quit, and the tour starts in a week. Do you want to do it?" And I'm thinking, I have 2 young kids and a full-time job, so I said, "Yeah, absolutely."
Of course.
Thinking, like, I wonder if anybody's going to object to this, like my boss or my wife. And Guitar World was into it, They said, as long as you get your work done from the road, we think it's great, because we could say one of our editors, plays in Dickie Betts' band. And that first year in 2005, I only went out for a month. And then something happened with his son Dwayne, and Dwayne, who had been on the West Coast, replaced me. But without going into a whole long deal about it, Dickie felt bad because he didn't want to fire me, and he even said to me, he goes, "I'm firing you, and you didn't do anything wrong, and so I hope you don't hate me." And I said, "Dickie, it's fine. I understand that Dwayne needs to be in your band, and it's your son, and like, it's fine. Everything's good. Like, it's totally cool. And he said, well, I'm bringing you back next year, and I'm never going to fire you again. Now, that is not what happened. But he did bring me back in 2006, and I did play with him for 12 years straight. He just fired me 4 times. So, you can't get fired more than once without getting rehired, right?
Right.
Right.
So I thought it was cool because I was like Billy Martin from the Yankees. You know, who gets fired 4 times? You got.
That's
great. That's pretty cool, man.
Andy, what was the experience like in like performing live on stage with him? Did you learn anything, or did you notice anything about him that he does differently than other players that you played with or know?
Well, I mean, so the only touring that I had done, that was on that level was doing the Jimi Hendrix tribute tours, meaning, big venues and the Beacon Theater and places like that all around the country, with amazing artists, Buddy Guy and Paul Rogers, getting to play and sing backup harmonies with Paul Rogers was phenomenal. And
wow.
And Paul, the first day in rehearsal in Seattle for that particular run, 2004, everybody's just sort of running around making sure the amps work and stuff, and somebody taps me on the back, and I turn around, and it's Paul Rogers, and he goes, "Hi, I'm Paul." I'm like, "Hey, how's it going?" And he's just the nicest person. And he said to me, "Hey, because people were coming and going, different people. We had Jerry Cantrell from Alice in Chains, also one of the nicest people, one of the coolest people you could ever get to know. Jerry was great, man. And we had Mike McCready, who also I got to know, a great guy, and along with Double Trouble, Chris Layton, and Tommy Shannon, guys from Living Colour. I kind of knew them for a while already. All really, each one of those guys, fantastic. It was really like it was such a cool vibe that we would make jokes about it. It was like Camp Hendrix,
Yeah.
It was this happy little collection of people in a bus going around, getting to play Hendrix's music, like wherever, every night. It was with Billy Cox and Mitch Mitchell, and that's a whole other. But I guess my point is that having done that before joining Betts prepared me for the mindset of preparing for a show, or being, making sure your gear was cool, or that you were comfortable, or whatever it is, all those different things, which includes some of your typical touring stuff, making sure there isn't rotting food in your bunk on the bus, and, or that like nobody threw up in there when you weren't looking or something. And
summer camp.
Yeah, so those things did prepare me for when I went out with Betts. But with Dickie, it was like right from the start. It was like 45, 50 shows over a 3-month period of time. We go out for 2.5, 3 weeks, home for a week, 2.5, 3 weeks. 2.5, 3 weeks on the road. I mean, it's basically like you're on a chain gang. You're like, absolutely in every way chained to these people. And it's just weird, if you've never done it, that every second there's a human being, like over here, or over here, or over here. Yeah. And we had to share rooms on the road too, so you'd get to your room and there was a person there. You'd be like, I can't handle being around another person, It's
definitely a challenge, man. Doing that,
Yeah. So I learned a lot about that, and that's more like you sort of learn about yourself. Like, how am I going to deal with this so I don't go crazy? But the other part of what I learned from Dickie, Dickie has a reputation that's well earned and totally justified. But there's two sides of it. he can be very difficult and he can be the greatest guy you've ever known. I mean, he just is both of those things. And when he's the greatest guy, playing with him was an amazing experience. There were nights where his guitar playing was so good. I mean, I couldn't even believe what I was hearing, and he was 1 foot away from me.
Wow.
Yeah, see that must have been magical. I mean, if we go back to the
That's
beginning,
cool.
yeah, it's just, you know, the reason to play guitar and you know, so it's not miserable is because it's kind of magical to you, the sound, the interaction. But when someone is playing at that level, I mean, even saxophone or piano or anything, you just sit there and you're just engulfed in the music, and your brain is just it's different than a lot of people understand, you know, at times, especially when you saw him nights where he was so good that you just were kind of just like, wow.
Well, and it was also, I mean, you know, this is Dickie Betts and the Allman Brothers.
Yeah, that does
I was well familiar with, you know, having listened to growing up listening to the records or hearing them on the radio billions of times.
right.
And then there's the sound, like right there in front of you. I mean, I did one gig with Butch Trucks because, you know, Dickie getting thrown out of the Allman Brothers had a lot to do with Butch Trucks and them not getting along. But Butch did a lot of local gigs on Long Island because he became friends with a guy named Larry Schmidt out in Bridgehampton who had a band called Great Caesar's Ghost. And Butch would play with them because they did all Allman Brothers. And so I was invited to play. There was a great Long Island guitar player named Ray Penny. I don't know if anybody knew Ray, but he was fantastic. And it's very sad. He got cancer and then he passed away. But we did a fundraiser for him at Guildhall in East Hampton. And I had sat in with the Allman Brothers, so I had played with Butch once before, sitting in with the Allman Brothers in 2003, which was an amazing experience. You know, 2 years before I started playing with Betts. You know, to be standing on stage next to Greg freaked me out completely. But it was so funny. We go to play this gig at Guildhall with Great Caesar's Ghost. It's going to be all Allman Brothers music. And just by the roll of the dice, they had me set up right in front of Butch's drums. And as soon as he started to play, it was like, oh, there it is. Like, there's the sound.
Right.
On every record.
Right. You can play covers, right? But when you hear the guy, it's just different. You know?
It's different. Yeah, it sure is.
Absolutely.
And so at the end of the gig, my friends that were there said, why did you spend the whole gig with your back to the audience? And I said, because I wanted to watch Butch. I mean, I was literally just watching Butch, like, while we were playing, like, the whole gig. Every once in a while, I'd turn around and look at the other guys, and I'd look at Butch again.
Amazing.
So it's like that, you know, you know, Dickie's a brilliant musician, and his music is so distinct. So that's the other thing, you know. So to play Jessica or In Memory of Elizabeth Reed or Blue Sky with him, you know, yeah, I learned a lot. I learned a lot about everything that you could possibly know about playing in a band, about group interaction, about how to play. You know, I was playing rhythm guitar like probably 80% of the time. So I learned a lot about rhythm, but you know, you change, you adapt, you know, like when you have to play bigger places and bigger stages and way, way, way louder, like you go to soundcheck.
Way louder.
Let's go to soundcheck. You can't believe how loud it is.
Yeah.
Soundcheck.
Wow.
Yeah,
I go up to my 100-watt Marshall, it's on 8. And I'm the only one playing, and the sound man's like, dude. But then when we start and the you know, the auditorium is completely packed, it needs to be that loud. It doesn't even sound loud. You know, it's like it sounds like it's supposed to sound. So Dickie said to me on that first tour, in the first 2 weeks, he said, oh, well, I've seen the changes in you I wasn't aware of it myself. And he said, you know, I've seen you go from a club guitar player to a guy who's learning how to like bring it up to another level, like, you know, what's necessary, what's needed. And I mean, I'm not trying to give myself credit at all. It's just that you know, you grow, you're given the opportunity to learn and grow and change and play in a band with great musicians. I guess it would be like, the feeling was a lot like being on a baseball team, you know, because you're on the road, and if you play like 5 great shows in a row, it's like you're on a winning streak, you know. So
Yeah.
like the team, like you're a team, it's this great feeling. So then the next gig comes, you can't wait to get out there as a group, you know, like you felt like the Cincinnati Reds or something, you know. Like the Cincinnati Reds from the mid-'70s or something, you know.
Right.
You know, and then you'd have one really bad gig, and it would be like, oh, you know, we suck, and we're all depressed. And Dickie was, you know, he'd say, well, we didn't get him tonight, we'll get him tomorrow night, you know. Like, he wouldn't worry about it. And then if we had a great gig, he would go, fooled him again. There was a lot of funny things, you know. He when he could be great, and when he was really, really nice, a typical thing he would say, he would come up to me at the end of the show and he would say, you sound really beautiful tonight. Keep that up and you'll be out of a job.
Nice. Well, that's a good lead-in. You know, there's a rumor have it that you wrote a book or something.
Ah,
I wrote a book. I wish I had one here to show you, but I could show you. This is the cover of it.
Look at that sticker. What does that say?
best-selling author.
New York Times
Look at
bestseller.
that.
This
Congratulations.
is kind of a cool little spiral bound thing that my co-author made for fun, and he sent me one. Every time I get a new shipment of books, I sell out, which is cool.
Awesome.
So I'm waiting for another box of books to come now. But as crazy as this sounds, since this whole pandemic thing started, one day I just put it up on Facebook. I said, well, I have books. You know, anybody wants a book and needs a book, you know, I have them with the original ones, of course, didn't have the shield on them that said New York Times bestseller, because it took, actually, we became a New York Times bestseller in the first week. So that was kind of amazing.
Yeah, it's a great book, but go ahead.
And so, you know, soon I got books that had the shield on them, and so I just put a little post up on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and said, oh, I have books, anybody want a book? And that was like in the middle of March, like the beginning of the pandemic. And I've sold 85 books. Just me going to the post office. Since then. Which is nuts, you know. But believe me, I'm happy when somebody wants a book and reads the book. So I wrote a book about Stevie Ray Vaughan. That's what it says. It says Texas Flood, the inside story of Stevie Ray Vaughan, written by Alan Paul and me. And Alan Paul wrote a book about the Allman Brothers called One Way Out, the inside history of the Allman Brothers. And I think it came out in 2014, which was right. He had no idea this was going to happen. The book came out when the band was breaking up. So it was the best publicity ever for the book.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Wow.
So he followed them on their last tour, selling books in the lobby. Like, this is it, you know.
Wow.
And so it was a fortuitous thing that he could not have foreseen. It just worked out that way. And the guys in the band, he had known them for a long time, so they were involved, very involved in helping with the book, like Butch and J-Mo, specifically. And Warren, too. Warren and Derek. Alan's pretty close to them. So, because of the success of One Way Out, the Allman Brothers book, which also made the New York Times bestseller list, the publisher, St. Martin's, said to Alan, whatever year it was, I guess in 2016 or 16, do you want to write another book? And he said, yeah, I want to write a book about Stevie Ray Vaughan, but I want to do it with my friend Andy, because I never met Stevie. and Andy met Stevie and he interviewed him a lot of times, and he has this long relationship with Double Trouble, blah blah blah.
Wow.
And so, so I think in like February of 2017 we signed the contract or something like that, and we spent 3 years writing this book. And the book did very well. Jimmy Vaughn became involved in writing the book and worked with us, which was a very tough task to get him to do that, because it's still very emotional for him, and it literally took 2 years to convince him to talk to us for the book. And there were some very intense phone calls where you're like holding the phone out like this, and he's very emotional. But and the reason for that, maybe some of you may have an insight into this from what you know about Stevie and Jimmy, is the story had been told often that they did not have a good relationship, that there was a competitive relationship, and maybe Jimmy, there were times where he wasn't the best big brother to Stevie. All this, there was some bad things out there that he was very aware of. And but if you know anything about Dwayne Allman and Greg Allman, or Johnny Winter and Edgar Winter, or if you have a brother, maybe you know what it's like to write with them.
Yep.
And so, famously, Dwayne and Greg fought all the time. And, the typical big brother, little brother, I got to know Johnny Winter really well. And, like, if you ask Edgar, Johnny Winter was the greatest thing that ever happened in the history of humanity.
Okay.
Like, on the seventh day, God rested, and then Johnny Winter, is the rest of the story of the history of humanity, as far as Edgar's concerned. But to Johnny, Edgar's like his annoying little brother.
That's great.
The whole brothers thing.
Yeah.
Jimmy was very aware of this, and he had sort of decided that it was sort of like it couldn't be undone. You know what I mean? Like, people had formed their opinions, and their opinions were fucked up, and like, you can't fight City Hall, And after a lot of conversations, the best way to boil it down is I said to him, "Listen, Jimmy, I knew Stevie, and I've known you for over 30 years, and I talked to you about him, and I talked to him about you, or is that the same thing? And I talked to the two of you together, and I said, I know that what I think is the true nature of your relationship, and that's the story we're going to tell. And if we tell that story, then all of these other things that people think are going to get pushed to the side where they belong, because it's not important. It's not really what it's about, because you guys were very close, and people who really knew you both know that." And he said, "Well, thank you, because that was a big part of writing this book, was to get that story right also. To honor Stevie's memory and his importance as a musician, but also to set the record straight on a lot of things that, were incorrect and fallacies and, historically inaccurate." And before Jimmy agreed to talk to us, he told all his family members that they should talk to us, which we didn't know. But all of a sudden we were getting calls from the cousins saying Jimmy told me I should talk to you, which was mind-blowing, because all these years he's always said never talk to a writer about Stevie. And so having the cousins all involved and then Jimmy involved made the book what it is. We have 170 pictures. Most of them have never been published before.
Yeah.
Stevie in his crib, The toughest thing about a biography are getting the early years, not just right, but giving the reader a tangible feeling for that person in their life, because you have to get that from the horse's mouth. You have to get that from a family member or from a person or from Stevie, because I got to interview Stevie 4 times. So we talked about all of that. Maybe some of you have had that experience, like you read a biography of David Bowie, let's say, and the early part of the book is usually the worst part, because it's so hard to get really great stuff, unless it's an autobiography. Once the guy's career is off and running, then there's a lot of sources for content. But anyhow, so it was a real blessing that all those people got involved. And like I said, I had got to know Chris Layton and Tommy Shannon from Double Trouble, who played with Stevie, and have been friends with them for 30 years. And I recorded with them and stayed with them at their houses and played shows with them. And so, that connection and friendship I had with them is a huge part of the book too. You know what I mean? Like, the kind of conversations that we would have are ones that were born out of having known somebody for 20 years, 25 years,
Right.
So I mean, it was a certain comfort level to get someone's real feelings about it, instead of just yeah, Stevie was great, we had a great time, and all that. You got, and it showed in the book, great care and great detail went into this, and the fact you could see the people around him care about him a great deal, and the fact that Jimmy opened up like that is amazing too.
No, it was amazing. It was really amazing. It was kind of mind-boggling. And Jimmy's still, he's a tough nut. There, like, you just never knew if he was going to. I still don't know, like, on a given occasion, if he's going to be really open and want to talk, or the opposite. And if he's the opposite, then it's his prerogative. If he's the opposite, you have to respect that. Alan and I both, we love Jimmy, and so we were concerned. We wanted him to like the book, and so I sent him in advance. I called him when we had advance readers, which was in March, so that would have been 5 months before the book came out. And I called him. I said, Jimmy, I have an advance reader of the book. Do you want me to send it to you? And he said yes. He's like, yes, I want to see it. So I sent it to him, and I was very nervous. Actually, no, we had them in like January, so we had them about 8 months before. Because then in the first week of March, he played at Iridium in New York City, and he had the book for, a couple weeks. So I went to see him, and then after the show, I went up to the dressing room. And I didn't know if he was going to, like, punch me in the face,
What the fuck is this? What the fuck? I didn't say this.
Oh, I kept envisioning him, like, opening the book, reading 2 pages and throwing it, ripping pages out, lighting it on fire, like, whatever. And
bullshit.
So I said, did you get a chance to look at the book? And he goes, yeah, I read half the book the first night.
Wow. First night, wow.
And he goes, it's a nice book. And that's it. And that's the only conversation we ever had about the book.
Wow. So I put I put a nice big blow-up picture of it. I know you guys can't see it, but if you're on the YouTube or the Facebook page, you can see a nice big blow-up of the book there. And let you know that it's... we're going to put a link down. I know it's available on Amazon.
Yes.
And there's an audio version of this too, right, on Audible.
Oh, there
I was tempted because I do love audio books, but I got to get a paper.
Look at this. I have the audio version. It's
wow.
It's like 8, like if you get it...
It's long. Yeah.
If you get it in this format, I don't know if anybody does anymore.
It's like Grateful Dead format. How many songs?
Yeah. That would be 2 songs of a Grateful Dead album, right? Like 4 CDs, right?
It's 10. It's 10 CDs.
10?
Shit.
I would lose one of them, and then the whole book would be fucked up.
Yeah.
10 CDs. Well, you reminded me. Conan O'Brien had a joke. He said, I just heard that the Grateful Dead are putting out an 80 CD set of them live. They're trying to decide which song it'll be.
So true.
Yeah.
Oh man.
But anyway, I mean, they sent me these, but like most people, I got it downloaded on my phone.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're the
Like
Audible thing, but I got to get this one on paper too. So.
And we got all these people to contribute to the audiobook. So Stevie's in there. Jimmy is not, although there's audio of Jimmy and Stevie together that I included from one of the interviews I did with the two.
Wow.
And then Chris Layton and Tommy Shannon, they read their parts, which is phenomenal. Guitar playing Denny Freeman, who was in Paul Ray and the Cobras, and long time really good friend to Jimmy and Stevie. Jackie Newhouse was the bass player with Stevie before Tommy Shannon, who I got to play with a couple years ago. Joe Priesnitz has been Eric Johnson's manager for 30 years, and he used to manage and book Stevie Rock Arts. And very sadly, Joe Priesnitz just passed away a few months ago, 66 years old. He had like bone marrow cancer or something. And I'm telling you, he was going through treatments for it then, and I had no idea. And then when I heard he passed, I couldn't believe it. It's just the worst thing ever. Because here's another thing about Joe that's amazing. I've known Joe a long time too, and because him and one other guy, Harold Vick, they had Rock Arts was their company, and they were booking agents. And so I said to him, do you have like some cool stuff from when you were booking Stevie Ray Vaughan and Double Trouble, like in 1979? He started booking him in 79, and he booked him from 79 to 83. I said, do you have some cool like contracts or, tour itineraries? Or he goes, oh yeah, like I have a file, that I've kept intact. He's had a lot of different artists through the years, but Eric's the guy. He's been the main guy all these years. And so he said, yeah, I'll send you some stuff. And then one day this huge box came. I mean, it was just like this gigantic box. And Joe said, well, I started looking through, and I didn't want to sit there and like have to decide what to send. So this is everything. It was everything.
Wow.
And so it was incredible. And we included in the book like some of those, booking calendars with like things are erased and written on top of, like in the studio with Boz Scaggs, erased, but you could still read it, all kinds of things like that. And even the whole negotiation and the canceled checks of when they fired him and they had to pay him, the money they owed him. And so Joe is just tremendous. But, I at the risk of going on and on and on, the real story is that Stevie was a guy I got to know. He wasn't one of my best friends, but I interviewed him 4 times and hung out with him a few times and got to play with him once. So I did get to know him. And he was a wonderful guy. And so the feeling for him as a person was something that I experienced, and I wanted to be able to communicate that to readers, like Stevie as a person. And I could tell you when the book was done, guys like Eric Johnson and David Grissom and Chris Layton and Tommy Shannon and Reese Winans and people who knew Stevie all said, you really captured Stevie the person, what he was like as a person. And so
that's awesome.
I think I felt that way too. I think first off, I've followed your writing for a long time in the magazines and stuff and the interviews. And times you and I have talked about, before the book came out, we talked about a few of the interviews you had done, and just, your writing really captures a lot of that. and it's amazing, and a great tribute to him. I mean, first off, he's iconic, and to make it that personal, it seemed very
Well, I can
satisfying
tell
for a
you,
book.
when I started writing guitar magazines. I mean, I was a guitar player, I
Right.
wasn't a writer, and so, like I said, the first guy was Steve Morris, and from their perspective, they were like, "Oh, this guy can play guitar, like he's a guitar player," and so we can talk about like real guitar stuff and throw the guitar back and forth, and this is actually fun. This isn't like, getting interviewed for USA Today or something,
Right.
like this is
Right.
pretty neat. And I mean, I had that experience with Buddy Guy, and so, Buddy Guy invited me to play with him, and Albert Collins, like, I mean, I couldn't believe it when Collins,
Wow.
Yeah, that's huge. That's just
Man.
at the end of the first interview I did with Collins, they used to do a thing in New York, the Benson and Hedges Blues Festival at the Beacon Theater. This is in like the late 80s, early 90s. And they would do like 3 nights. It'd be great. Like everybody would be there. It'd be terrific. In fact, the night that Stevie Ray Vaughan played at the Garden with Jeff Beck in 1989, which I went to, I don't know if any of you guys went, but that same night, the Fabulous Thunderbirds were playing at the Beacon Theater, part of the Benson Hedges Blues Festival. And I was with my drummer, and I said, I know the second this is over, Stevie's going to go to the Beacon and sit in with Jimmy. So the show at the Garden ends, and we jump in the car and drive up to the Beacon.
yeah.
We're walking down, and within like 10 minutes of sitting down, Stevie comes walking out. It was like we were chasing him around town, But Collins, I interviewed him in the afternoon, and I don't know if any of you guys ever met Albert Collins. He was the best. He was the nicest person. Everybody called him Pops, and he called everybody son. And he was just warm and great and amazing guitar player. And so it was before the show. He looked fantastic. He had this black suede jacket like what Hendrix was wearing at Woodstock, but Hendrix's was white. It was a black suede fringe jacket.
Fringe, yeah.
And Albert, he just looked so great. And he tuned his guitar in a very weird tuning, an open F minor tuning, and he would use a capo like way up high on the neck. But I had learned about his tuning and about like sort of how to emulate the way he played. So at the end of the interview, like he didn't know me. At the end of the interview, I'd ask him stuff, he'd play. I said, Albert, let me see your guitar. And I started to play. And he goes, oh man, you kicking that guitar. He said, you want to play with me tonight at the Beacon? So I didn't play with him that night, but about a year later I did play with him. And anyhow, that is why the stories that I would write about that Tom was making reference to, I think, had an additional sort of depth to them, because I mean, I'll give you an example. Like I did one interview with Robert and Dean DeLeo, Stone Temple Pilots,
Right.
and nicest guys ever. And I would bring this guitar to every single interview, plugged into this little plastic amp that I should have had everybody sign because it would have been insane. Like this little tiny plastic amp called the Guitar Buddy, and like Buddy Guy, B.B. King, Rush. I had Alex Lifeson and Geddy Lee playing through it at the same time.
Oh, no shit.
Yeah. Which is a story unto itself, which is hysterical. The amp had 2 inputs, literally this big, ran on like D-cell batteries, but it sounded good. And for whatever reason, so Geddy and Alex are both plugged in, and I'd say, well, show me like Tom Sawyer or something. And they're playing, and it sounded like Rush, like on the radio,
Right.
with no drums, coming out of this little tiny amp. But for whatever reason, who knows why, if Geddy turned the volume of his bass off, it would turn the guitar off. So we had no idea at first that was going to happen, and so they were playing different things, and I asked Alex to show me something, and Geddy just sort of instinctively, like, turned the volume of his bass off, and the guitar went off. So Alex was like, "Oh, I'm not getting a sound," and I was like, "Oh, I don't understand why that is." And then Geddy was like, "Hey, wait," and he realized he could control. He goes, "Oh, this is the greatest thing for a bass."
A bass player? Yeah.
Oh, don't let that secret get out.
Take care of that motherfucker.
Those fucking assholes.
Like, we have to make this like a regular thing that I can control the guitar volume from my bass. And they'd been friends since high school, so it was like the Three Stooges. Every time Alex would go to play, Geddy would turn them off, and he'd be like, "Come on, man," and then he'd go, "Oh, I'm sorry." Anyhow, so the Stone Temple Pilots, but this is what would happen. These guys would realize that they could play. They could just talk and play. Same thing happened with Brian Setzer. And they could just be themselves and be guitar players. Like, guitar players just want to play guitar. Like, they don't want to get involved in anything else. Yeah. Like, I've been lucky and I met a lot of guitar players and got to know them. So, like, two guys that come to mind, like Slash and Joe Perry, they just want to play guitar. Like, they're nice people. There's no bullshit. There's no, like, ego trip drag thing. They're just like guitar players, like, "Oh, you dig the guitar? Me too." It's like very simple.
That's really the premise of the show. I mean, we're just here just because we just love guitar and we just want to talk about guitar. And we love the fact you sold the best-selling book. But we just love guitar. We would just sit here all day and just talk about that. I mean, the lesson I had with you was 2.5 hours, and we did an hour of lessons while we did this whole conversation. So it was great, and it's amazing. It's a musical connection. So it's great to hear that there's that really across the board. Even days when Dickie was probably difficult, he still just wanted to play guitar, right?
No, not always. But the guitar is this thing. It's this contraption that you look at every day and think, what is this thing, and how does it work, and how do I do something on it that's going to make me happy and not sound horrible and get somewhere, and it poses the same sort of challenges to you every single day. And Jeff Beck said something so cool. He said, "If you find something cool on the guitar, don't give yourself too much credit, because you just found it. It was always there. Like, it was in the guitar already. You just got lucky and you found it. So don't pat yourself on the back."
Right.
It's like the Michelangelo thing about, they said, "How do you carve a marble statue like David?" And he said, "Oh, I just get rid of the part you don't need."
That's exactly it, right?
It's like, oh, that.
It's always there.
Yeah. I just get rid of the, stuff I didn't, only kept the parts you needed. And, but, like Keith Richards is the same, like he's just a guitar player. Like, it's that endless thing. It's such a cool thing. If you always have that fascination and love affair with the instrument and music, then all the other things, they really don't matter. I'll give you another Dickie story that I think is important, a good lesson that I learned from Dickie. We had 2 shows we did in one night upstate New York somewhere with the Outlaws, and there was sort of like a late afternoon show and then an evening show. And we played the late afternoon show, and we'd been playing a lot. It might have been like the 3rd year of playing good 50 shows a year, and we'd rehearse for 10 days or 2 weeks before we went out, and the band was really happening. And anyway, we played this gig, and I thought it sounded amazing. Like, it sounded like a record. Like, everything was perfect. I mean, it was just like, tighter than a gnat's ass, as they say.
Yeah.
And we come off, go on the bus, and Dickie, in his inimitable way, he goes, "Hey guys." Usually when he said "hey guys," what was going to follow wasn't really the best thing ever. And he's like, "Hey guys," he goes, "I just want to say that set that we just played, everything was played perfectly. Every chord, every riff, every accent, every single thing was absolutely perfect. Sounded like a record. And it was the most boring motherfucking thing I ever heard in my life." He goes, "If you think I hired you, any of you, to go out there and play like a trained motherfucking monkey that's like on a fucking assembly line, like just doing the same shit, you're out of your mind. And if we go out and play a second set like that first set, you're all fucking fired."
Oh shit!
And then he walked off the bus.
Wow.
Damn.
That's good. So I'm going to bring us to a couple of sections. First, Andy's got a website, andyaledort.com. It is actually, I put the website up in front of us. Just gonna put it.
And is that where we can find the book on the website?
Yeah, you can find the book, but like most things, the easiest way to get a hold of me is either through Facebook. I mean, I have like a whole bunch of different Facebook pages, and then there is a Texas Flood Inside Story of Steve Ray Vaughan book page that we have, if you want that. But people can send me private messages through Facebook or Instagram or Twitter, because I'm teaching a lot, doing a lot of Skype and Zoom lessons.
Teaching.
And so believe me, I'm easy to get a hold of through Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, or my website. They're all good.
Awesome. So, all right. So we're going to go on to the gear section. This is Lenny. Usually Lenny introduces this section. So he's going to talk about it real quick, and then he's going to ask some questions for us.
All right.
Okay. All right. So Joey, I'll start with you.
Okay.
A particular piece of gear that you just purchased or interested in purchasing, or just downright pisses you off. Do you have anything?
Right. Believe it or not, this week I usually I'm not a big fuzz pedal user. I don't use a lot of fuzz. And I know it's great. And I have some great ones. I have the Wampler's Velvet Fuzz. I love it.
Yeah.
But you know what kicked it off the board this week? And this is I was laughing about it because the little orange Behringer FZ300, I think, kicked it off the board because it sounds fantastic.
Is it the Hyper?
Wow.
Yeah,
Is
it's
it the Hyper Fuzz?
Yeah. The little orange one. I mean, it's what, $29 or whatever. I mean, you kick a $200 pedal off the board with a $30 one, and it just does the job well. So that's that made this week. I mean, you look at the stacks of shit I got back here. Obviously, I don't mind spending money on gear, and this time it was a $30 pedal. So that's it, Lenny, for me this week.
Cool.
I
All right.
gotta get one.
Yeah.
Tommy, how about you? What do you got this week?
Well, I fell prey to Pete Thorne saying that this thing.
Fuck Pete Thorne.
That's it.
It's the NUX thing. It's got a wireless thing, and I can't make it sound like anything but shit.
What is it?
It's a tiny remote control Bluetooth amp that's battery powered. It'd probably be better with Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson playing through it.
Probably.
Turning each other down.
What brand is it, so we can make sure that you won't get any money from them?
It's called NUX.
Oh. I could see. Yeah.
So here's it's a great idea. It's got an app to control it and everything, and maybe I need to spend a little more time with it. But
No, you
out of the
don't.
box, plugging it in, and I'm like, this is just not.
I don't understand any of that stuff, but I have to say I would feel guilty otherwise. I just wrote an article for Positive Grid because they have.
Okay, let's talk about that.
Well, I haven't tried it. I have no idea what it sounds like. I don't know anything. But they did ask me to write something for them. It was like an instructional thing that then describes the types of things that the amp will do, because there's like chord generators and rhythm backing track emulators and all that kind of stuff. And the amp apparently is selling really, really well, and doing well, and it's Bluetooth and all those other things.
Well, it's selling on Facebook. I can't scroll through Facebook without seeing it a million times.
Oh yeah, no, they're selling a lot of them. So I don't know,
Well,
maybe it's great. I'm too much of a Neanderthal about everything.
Oh,
and
me too.
I mean everything.
Yep. Yeah.
But
look behind me.
I don't know if you do
Everything's
get
got
it.
a tube in it.
If you do get that, I'll walk down the street to see what this thing is capable, and I'll drag this behind me, on a rope, so we can, maybe I can sell it as a relic.
Yeah. Yeah. So, all right, Len.
Andy, how about you? You got something you want to talk about, or just purchase, or
The amp hasn't blown up yet, so let's talk about the amp.
Yeah, let's hear it.
I gotta hear some of this.
All right. So,
Now,
You're gonna love this.
I can move the computer so you could see it. Maybe I should do that.
Sure.
I mean, it's going to be like the Poseidon adventure for a minute.
I'll take it off that view for a second.
We've done this segment.
Yeah.
Hold on, don't throw up.
We've done a couple of tests that were just terrible on phone.
All right, so there you have it. And so here's the story. Oh wait, I could put a spotlight on it. Here.
Dun, dun, dun.
It's going to be really cheesy.
Wow.
I'll try to light it from above. Hold on. Wait, I can't. My production. Oh yeah.
There it is.
Hire the intern.
The production value of this show is phenomenal.
Yeah.
And I take all the blame for that.
Well, no, we don't skimp.
So now this is.
There's my daughter, by the
way. That was on fire before. This is the amp that was burned. That was making the burning smell before.
Something happened. What was happening before was that the power tubes were, like molten lava red. And now they're not. And so, but here's the deal with this amp, like in a nutshell, really quickly. 2 years ago, I got a call, and somebody was selling a 1972 Silverface Bandmaster top. And that band I made reference to from the 70s, my Southern rock band in 1978, my rig was a 72 Silverface Bandmaster top, which is, I believe, 40 watts, with a 412 bottom. And nobody used distortion pedals in those days. I mean, nobody. You would start the gig with your amp on 7, and then, within a few songs, you would turn it up to 8, and by the second set, it would be on 10. And it sounded amazing. I mean, really, I didn't know anybody that had a distortion pedal. In fact, right now, I'm using the first distortion pedal I ever bought. I'm using 2 together, but a yellow DoD overdrive preamp 250.
Yeah, we talked about that.
And this is like the Yngwie pedal.
Yeah.
It's the only pedal that he ever uses.
Yeah.
In fact, his have all been repainted so they look like Ferraris. They have Ferrari logos on them. But if you buy like the Yngwie pedal, it's just an DoD overdrive preamp 250. It's the same pedal.
Yeah.
So what I did was I bought this top, but what I wanted to do was to make a combo, a 112 combo, like grab and go amp like a deluxe, because I thought that would be awesome to have a Silverface Bandmaster chassis in a 112 combo box, and 40 watts. It's as loud as my Super. 112. My favorite 12-inch speaker is a Celestion G12 65.
Yeah.
You guys may be familiar with those.
Yep.
I have a 1978 50-watt JMP Marshall combo that just sounds amazing, and that's what's in there. That's what it came with in those days. And you can still get those G12 65s, and they're great. And they're not expensive, and it's my favorite 12-inch speaker. So I called my buddy Mitch Colby from Colby Amps and Park Amps and Sun Dragon Amps, who made the replica of the Jimmy Page amp.
Right.
And some of you guys might know Mitch. He's the greatest. And
yeah.
And I told him, I want to talk to him about it. And he said, well, here's the deal. Your single 12 is an 8 ohm speaker, and the transformer in the Bandmaster is a 4 ohm transformer. He said, why don't you let me swap it for a 50 watt basement transformer that's switchable 4 ohm 8 ohm, and then you could put it on 8 ohms when you're just using the single speaker in the combo.